Hey everyone, Houston Math Prep here to talk to you about finding a midpoint between 2 points in the xy plane. So here I've got my xy plane with 2 points, and if we wanted to find the midpoint, or the point that is exactly halfway between those 2 points, you can imagine that it would definitely lie on the line that goes straight between them, so somewhere halfway in between these 2 points on this straight line between those points. What we're going to do here to envision how to find the midpoint is actually think of this diagonal line here, this path between the 2 points, as the hypotenuse of a right triangle. So if we think about the halfway point on this horizontal line, this bottom side of the triangle here, and then traveling from that point up to the hypotenuse, that's going to tell us where our midpoint is. We could do a similar thing on the vertical side of the triangle here. If we were to go halfway up this side of the triangle here and then go straight over to the hypotenuse of the triangle, that would also point to the midpoint. So you can see that the midpoint here is going to be halfway between the 2 points in the x direction and halfway between the 2 points in the y direction. Now in this example that I've drawn here, you can see that my 2 points where we're trying to find the midpoint between them, they're on corners of the grid, so that means their coordinates are integers, they're easy to work with. These are also pretty close together. We're not involving any large numbers, but if we, say, had points that weren't at integer values or were very far apart, it might be difficult just to count and figure out where the midpoint is. So what we want to do in this video is give you a formula that you can always use to calculate the midpoint, whether it's easy numbers and small numbers you're working with, or large numbers that are very far apart. So we'll go ahead and label our 2 points x1, y1 for my first point, and x2, y2 for my second point. And since we know that this midpoint is going to be halfway between these two x values, x1 and x2, then the way we could find the x-coordinate of this midpoint is just to simply take the average of the two x values we have here. We could do a similar thing if we want to find the y value for this midpoint. We could simply take the average of y1 and y2, the average of those two y values. Now remember, when we take the average of two numbers in math, we add those up and divide by 2. So when we're taking the average of the two x values and the average of the two y values, for the x value of the midpoint, we're going to be adding the x values of our 2 points and dividing by 2. And for our y coordinate, we'll be adding y1 and y2 and dividing by 2 to get that average. Once we have those x and y coordinates, then we'll just want to write those as an ordered pair, and that will be our midpoint. We'll go ahead and keep our midpoint formula down in the bottom right corner here while we work some examples for you. So here we want to find the midpoint of 1, 9 and 15, 3. In other words, the point that is halfway exactly between those 2 points. Now using our formula here, you can see we need an x1, x2, a y1, and a y2. So since this is our first point that I'm given, I'll go ahead and I'll call this x1 and this one y1. So x1 is 1 and y1 is 9. If this is the second point that I'm given, then we'll go ahead and call 15 our x2 and 3 our y2. This is the second x coordinate we're given and the second y coordinate we're given. Now if we want to find our midpoint, then that's just simply going to be writing an ordered pair using this formula. x1 plus x2 over 2 will be the first component. So we'll have x1, which is 1, plus x2, which is 15, divided by 2. And then for the y coordinate, we'll have y1 plus y2 divided by 2. y1 is 9, plus y2 is 3, divided by 2. And we'll just do some simplifying. So I get 1 plus 15 on top there. That gives me 16 over 2. And then here 9 plus 3 would give us 12 over 2. And we should go ahead and simplify these. 16 divided by 2 is going to give us 8 for our x-coordinate, and 12 divided by 2 will give us 6 for our y-coordinate. And so that is our midpoint between 1, 9 and 15, 3. Looking at our second one here, find the midpoint of -4, 6 and 1, -3. So this is my first point. That means this is x1 is -4 and y1 is 6. My second point here, that means 1 is x2 and -3 is y2. Writing our midpoint using the formula we have down in the corner again. Our ordered pair for this midpoint will be x1 plus x2 over 2 will be -4 plus 1 over 2. And here we have y1 plus y2 over 2. That will be 6 plus -3. Careful with your sign there, over 2. Go ahead and simplify what we have on the top, so that will give us negative 3 over 2. And this one, 6 plus negative 3 is 6 minus 3. That will be positive 3 over 2. And 3 halves will not reduce, so we go ahead and leave this as fractions. Negative 3 halves, comma 3 halves for our midpoint of negative 4, 6, and 1, negative 3. Let's do one more example for you that involves fractions. So we have the midpoint of 1/2, comma 2/3, and negative 3/4, comma 7 over 6. So our first point here, we call this 1/2 is our x1, and 2/3 is our y1. So for our second point here then, that means negative 3/4 is x2, and 7 over 6 is our y2. For our midpoint, I'm going to give myself a little bit more room here, start over on the side. So our midpoint will be x1 plus x2 over 2, so let's just go ahead and write this out. So x1 is 1/2 plus x2, which is negative 3/4, plus a negative will be like minus when we get that, over 2, so that's our x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, now our y component here, y1 plus y2 over 2, so y1 is 2/3, plus our y2 is 7 over 6 over 2. And so now what we'll need to do is actually get a common denominator to add these fractions here. Let's go ahead and do that. So this 1 over 2 and 3 over 4, a common denominator would be 4, so I'll go ahead and multiply this one by 2 to give us a 4 on the bottom. This one already has the common denominator 4 on the bottom. So if we do that, that will give me 2 over 4 minus 3 over 4 on the top there, and all of that will be divided by 2, comma. Here, same thing, we need a common denominator. We have 3 and 6, both go into 6, so I'll go ahead and leave the 7 over 6. It already has the common denominator. I'll multiply this one by 2 to get a 6 on the bottom. And we'll go ahead and say then 4 over 6 plus 7 over 6 divided by 2. Now let's go ahead and add those. So here we have 2/4 minus 3/4, so we subtract the tops only. So that gives us negative 1/4 divided by 2. Here 4 over 6 plus 7 over 6, we add the tops only, we get 11 over 6 divided by 2. And now remember what divide by 2 means with fractions. If I have, for example, negative 1/4, and I want to divide that by 2, remember that's going to be the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So that'll be the same as negative 1/4 times 1/2. Okay, so this one's going to be negative 1/4 times 1/2. And then the same thing here, we have divide by 2, so instead of dividing by 2 with fraction, let's think of multiply by the reciprocal, multiply by 1/2. So if we go ahead and do the multiply straight across now, we get negative 1 times 1 on top, 4 times 2 gives us 8 on the bottom, so negative 1/8 is our x component for the midpoint. 11 times 1 for the y will give us 11 on top, and 6 times 2 will give us 12. So we'll have negative 1/8, comma 11 over 12 for our midpoint of these two here. All right, everyone, hopefully that helps you with finding midpoints. Good luck on your midpoints. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.